Hey, this is Andrew Brown from Exam Pro, and in this follow along, I'm going to show you how to set up Kubernetes on a managed service like Google Cloud Platform. We're actually going to look at a bunch of them: GCP, AWS, Azure, Civo, DigitalOcean, just so you get an idea of what it's like actually setting these up for production. They're not going to exactly be on the exam because the exam is more focused on Kubernetes Cloud Native itself, though you should know about managed services. But I'm going through this with you because in practicality, this is where you'd actually deploy Kubernetes. And if you get to see what it's like on all the different providers, even if you can't do what I'm doing and just watch through it, you can understand the differences between the offerings, how easy it is to do it, but measuring my frustration level as I work through it. And just kind of get a bit of a difference. So we're starting with GCP because it's the easiest, I just want to start off with something really nice and light. So what we'll do here is make sure you have a Google Cloud account. I'm not going to show you how to do that, but once you do have your account, your full access account there, I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. You can see I was doing one earlier here and it did not delete, but we'll say new project and I'll say GKE example 2. And I'm going to go ahead and hit create. So that's going to create our project. And then they usually create pretty darn quick. Notice it's still going there, so we might have to wait a little bit. There it is, it's ready. We'll click over to our GKE example 2. And from here at the top, we'll type in GKE. Now, if we don't want to do that, we could also go on the left-hand side here. If you click that button and go down below and go to Kubernetes Engine. But I'm going to type in GKE. And Google makes it super, 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 super easy to run Kubernetes, which is no surprise because they originally created Kubernetes and then gave it to the CNCF, right? So if they didn't have the easiest platform, I would be surprised. I'll go ahead and enable that. And while that's going, let's look up GKE prices, because it's actually pretty in line with AWS. Now, I used to say that GKE had a free control plane, but looks like they don't anymore. The control plane is 10 cents per hour, regardless if it's autopilot mode or standard mode. So you're always paying for that control plane, all right? Difference between autopilot mode and standard mode. Well, standard mode is just like how AWS runs with EC2 instances. It's just running on virtual machines. And then autopilot mode is running on Cloud Run. So Cloud Run is like AWS Fargate. It's just a way of running serverless containers. So this one you pay for what you use. This one you pay for the underlying virtual machines that you spin up. Same thing. There are some nice things about Google Cloud where they have a service called Anthos. So Anthos is a way of Google Cloud Anthos is a way of having a GKE cluster, but you can actually have nodes running on different environments like AWS on your environment, stuff like that, and manage it from a central location. So there's an additional cost for that. I don't really know the use case for this because I just can't really think about it. But one nice thing about Anthos is that it has Anthos migrate. So you go migrate to GKE. For some reason, like if you want to do it, it's always under that. And what it can do is it can actually import a virtual machine from anywhere like AWS, and it will turn it into a container and then run it on GKE. So it's like this really easy way to get your containers or your applications into containers. Like it will generate out a Docker file. Sorry, I'm just drinking water here. But the advantage there is that if you had a VM and you use that tool, then you get the Docker file. You wouldn't have to write it yourself. So that's kind of one advantage that I like about that. But anyway, we're over here. We typed in GKE. We're on our cluster. And so we have an option with Quick Start, which is not bad. But I'm going to just do it the old-fashioned way, create. We have two options, standard, autopilot. Standard is where you manage the nodes, so virtual machines underneath. This is using Google or Run Cloud underneath, right? Serverless containers. So we'll choose GKE standard. And we'll need to name our cluster. So I'll say GKE example. And it has to be lowercase, of course. Zonal or regional, we just want to run it as a zone. We'll let it choose whatever zone it wants. For the control plane, we'll have it release channel. We don't care about stack version. We'll let it stay up to date. And we'll go next and hit create. Now, there was a bunch of other options, but I didn't click them. And maybe I'll go back there. I don't even know if I ever looked at them when I went there. Standard mode, configure here. Default pool. Yeah, so I never even looked at this. So it's going to launch up 3 nodes. We really don't need 3 nodes. We could have made it 2, which is too late now. If you're watching this, maybe before you launch this, maybe you might want to make it 2, because it's more like, think about it. Every node that you run is going to cost money, right? So we don't want these running too long. Here it's using E2, E2 medium. Notice like when I launched up my Cloud 9 environment, I chose 4 gigabytes of memory because that's what I find it at. Like they say you can run it on 2, run it on less, but I would never run it on less than 4 gigabytes, the nodes, 100 gigabytes. So, you know, I run it at 40, but like this is kind of more for a production use case. I'm going to go here to security. That looks fine. Metadata, that looks fine. Automation options, networking options. I'm just seeing if there's anything interesting here. Yeah, the only thing I would have done is I probably would have made it 2 nodes, okay? Or even 1. Like I only need 1 additional node there, but we're running 3 nodes, which is fine. For you, I'd probably reduce it just to save money, but for me, it's fine because we're not going to keep this up for long. And so we are just waiting for this to provision. And so it says it takes about 5 minutes. It is like the fastest at provisioning. I know that like DigitalOcean says there's 4 minutes, but honestly, GKE or like provisions clusters so darn fast. It's really awesome. But I'll see you back here in a moment when it's done. It's at 67%. I'll see you then, okay? Hey, this is Andrew Brown from Exam Pro, and we are back with GKE. And so, again, I'm telling you, this one's the easiest one to use. All we got to do is click Connect at the top. And what it's going to do is show the command line that we use with gcloud in order to authenticate to the cluster. And then kubectl will work, but it's even easier than that. We just hit Run in Cloud Shell. It's going to launch Cloud Shell. It's going to establish that connection, and then we can do kubectl right away. And as this is working, I'm just going to maximize this window so we can see what we're doing. And notice that it has a line here, so now we just have to hit Enter. And then we'll say Authorize. You're going to be so disappointed when we see the Azure's Cloud Shell because it's so painful. And so if we type in whoops. If we type in, I was just typing there, don't know why I did that, but if we type in kubectl get pods, give it a moment here to think. So there, it is connecting. If we do -a, we can kind of see all the interesting things that it has here. So FluentBit, GKE metrics, connectivity agent, DNS, all this fun kind of stuff, metric server. And so now what I want to do is just deploy something. So let's say kubectl, create, deploy, nginx, image equals nginx, because I just want to expose something so that we can see something. And I think we need a double hyphen. Notice like when you're doing this, when I'm typing, it's a bit delayed. It might be delayed for you because it is a remote shell. Okay, so it's created that now. Now what's interesting here is if we go to, I don't know why it's not in our GKA thing, but we'll go back to our engine, maybe because I expanded it. We can actually see our cluster. If we go to our workloads, we can see it in here. Okay, we can click into here. We can see stats and stuff. It's all hooked up and giving us rich information. Go back to workloads. Even notice like we can hit deploy here and specify information. So I didn't have to do it through here. I could just went here and said new container image and just specify the repository and stuff like that. So it does really add a very nice additional layer. If like you're really not great at the scripting here, this makes things so much easier. And not for everything though. Like, and by the way, we can go here and we can edit these live too. So if we want to edit this server, or like this, sorry, this resource, it'll pull up the YAML and we can edit it in line here, which is really nice. But if we go over to the service or service ingress, we can't create a service. We can create ingress if we already have a service created. So not everything is great in Google Cloud World, but it's still extremely good and one of the best. Okay, so I'm going to do kubectl expose because we want to have a service so that we can connect it to ingress so that we can see what we built here. So we're doing nginx port equals port 80. Okay, hyphen target port equals 80. And then we want to do type equals node port because it has to be either load balancer or node port for it to work. You can't use cluster IP in order to hook up the ingress to get a load balancer with Kubernetes. We'll go ahead and hit enter. That is now exposed. We can go up to our services here, and then we can see the services there. And now if we want to add ingress, we can just checkbox it here and say create ingress. And what it's going to do is set up an external load balancer. a Google Cloud load balancer. So that is fine. We'll go down here and choose Nginx. We can't change either of these. Right there, that's fine. HTTP protocol is fine. We can preview the ingress here. So this is what it's going to do. Very simple, right? So nothing complicated. We'll go ahead and create. And remember how painful it was when we were doing ingress. Like, what was we were doing it with? Service mesh, right? So it's so nice that this is super easy to do, because that is honestly the biggest pain for this stuff is I'm going to do K8 ingress. I don't know if that's going to be the name of the ingress. Oh, it is. Okay. Because that is usually the largest pain, is just dealing with the ingress. And so Google knows that. And so they make it super easy. So now what it's going to do is it's going to spin up a load balancer, right? So it's creating an ingress, and it says external HTTP LB. And this does take quite a bit of time. So I'll see you back here in a bit, okay? All right, so we are back. It wasn't a long wait, but just know that you should hit the refresh button, because I was sitting here and it just looked like it wasn't done, but it was done for a long time. But I was fine because I was doing another follow along. But if you're sitting here, don't sit here for 100 years. Hit the refresh button, make sure that it is done or not done. So it is done, and what it's done is it's actually set up a load balancer for us in this case. So now, if you scroll on down below, it says load balancing resources. We can click through those, and you can see it actually set up a load balancer. Right, here it is. We have an IP address. We have probably like a DNS record somewhere here, but we have a load balancer. We click back here. We can see it made a load balancer for us. All right. So now, if we want to access this, I'm just trying to remember how, or I'll just look up in my instructions that I wrote. I didn't write it down, but you know what? We'll just type in kubectl, because it's an ingress controller. So we type in get ingress, and there's its IP address. It probably is the same. Yeah, it's the same one as here. And so if I copy this, whoops. If I copy this, and we go to a new tab here and we paste it in, ta-da, our Nginx page works, okay? One other thing I wanted to show you is that it has a code editor. If you hit open editor, we didn't have a need for it, but if we did need to use one, just give it a second to launch. The reason I'm showing it to you here is because it is really, really awesome. It's basically all Visual Studio Code. We could have technically done, instead of using AWS Cloud9, we could have technically used this. But the only thing is that it only has a single context. At least I don't know how to change the context. And so the reason I went with Cloud9 is because you can spin up multiple virtual machines and stuff like that. And Cloud Shell is more like tied to a single virtual machine, and I don't know how to flip between them, okay? But it's fine. It runs really fast, and Google Cloud is very easy to use, but I was more comfortable with Cloud9, that's why I used it. But I just wanted to show it to you because when we go to use Azure, I just want to compare it to how awful their shell is, like as their code editor, and it makes no sense because they make Visual Studio Code, and it's terrible. But anyway, we've accomplished our goal here, and so in order to get rid of all this stuff, what we're going to do is go ahead and delete our cluster. So I'll go ahead here, and I'm going to go and delete our cluster. And now it did create a load balancer, so I'm really hoping that it tears down the load balancer with it. Right, so we go to load balancers. I don't want to kind of delete it and cause an issue here. Oh, it did vanish right away. So I guess it does tear it down right away. And if you really, really want to make sure that everything is gone, we can go ahead and delete the project, or like the project that we created. So we go to manage resources, and then you'll see GKE2 example. We'll go here, hit delete, and then we'll put the name in, and it will shut down. So no, we're not getting billed for anything in that project anymore. It's scheduled for delete for March 18th, but we don't have to worry about it anymore, okay? So we are done Google Cloud. We'll move over to Azure, then we'll do the really hard one, AWS, and then we'll do some bonus ones, okay?